I'm Howard Friedman. I'm the director of the Jewish Community Library in San Francisco. It's my great pleasure to welcome all of you this evening. It's really an agonizing moment right now for most of us, I think, and I appreciate the opportunity to come together. And while tonight's subject matter is quite afar from what's happening in Israel and Gaza, it feels quite appropriate to be thinking of how we cope and how we heal when things fall apart. As always, I'd like to thank the Friends of the Jewish Community Library who make everything we do at the library possible, particularly now that the library is independent. I hope you'll consider becoming a friend by giving at any level at friendsofthejcl.org. Tonight's event is made possible by longtime friends Mark and Marcy Dollinger. Please note that automated closed captioning can be turned on or off by clicking the CC button at the bottom of your screen. And now I'll introduce Joanne Greene. Joanne grew up in Boston and attended Northwestern University and Emerson College before settling in the Bay Area, where she was a recognized voice for decades on San Francisco radio. For 11 years, she was the director of the Center for Jewish Peoplehood at the Osher Marin JCC, and she's currently the co-host with Gabby Moskowitz of the podcast All the F Words and the host of In This Story, which is a podcast featuring her flash nonfiction. Joanne lives in Marin, but is joining us from Culver City. Joanne, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much. And I'm in Los Angeles because I've been taking care of my grandchildren, which is, I'm sure, something that many of you can relate to. It is such a privilege and an honor, and I'm grateful every day for the fact that I can keep up with them. They are 2.5 and 5, and today I was climbing on a jungle gym and up a little ladder and coming down a slide, and it's quite insane. I see so many familiar faces, and I want to thank you all for taking the time to join and also for supporting the Jewish Community Library. And I especially want to thank my dear friends Mark and Marcy Dollinger for helping to underwrite tonight's program. So I've been speaking to lots of different audiences, and of course my favorite is when I get to speak to a Jewish audience, because then I don't have to, then I can share the Jewish parts, and there are many Jewish parts of this book. For those of you who are not at all familiar with my story, let me just briefly say, I was a person who did too much, who felt safer when I thought I was in control. I had a great career in radio for many years, and when that finished, I became a Jewish professional, which was a complete departure, and I didn't have any formal training in that at all, but I was a producer and I knew how to produce things. So I produced programs and had 2 kids and really prioritized my marriage, caring for my mom as she got older and my sister as she became ill. They both lived in Marin County as well. And then one day on October 3rd, 2012, I was leaving work from the Jewish Community Campus in Marin, which is the home to not only the JCC, but my synagogue, Congregation of Shalom, and the Brandeis Hillel Day School. I was trying to get home to see a debate that night between then candidate Barack Obama and Mitt Romney. Perhaps you were doing the same. And it was 5:30, and I walked into a crosswalk, and I'm going to read you how my book begins. Throughout this little presentation tonight, I'll read little excerpts from the book and talk in between, and then we'll open it up for questions. Okay? Know if you think that's a good approach. Excellent. As I step into the crosswalk, there's a sudden deafening sound. An explosion, maybe? Then I'm airborne, thrown onto the hood of a car. What the hell? I silently scream to the universe, or God, or no one. Seriously? All I can hear is an ear-splitting cacophony. All I feel is wild, uncontrolled movement. Stop the car, stop the car. The car is catapulted down North San Pedro Road, my head banging against its windshield. I slip off the hood onto the ground, alive. I can't move, can't speak. I lift my head and blink my eyes a few times. Things come into focus. To my right, people crowd the sidewalk, staring at me with their mouths open in horror, like in Munch's painting. I hear someone yelling, "Oh my God, oh my God." I slowly turn my head in the direction of the sound, but see nameless faces. Cars are turned in different directions. People are running toward me. I'm lying splayed in the middle of the street and feel my short cotton print dress hiked up, naked thighs on display, like that matters. I keep blinking, but the scene doesn't change. A white pickup truck stops in the middle of the street. A man wearing an Oakland A's jersey jumps out and runs toward me. "You're fine," he says. "You'll be fine." A woman is yelling at him to stop talking to me. Why is she angry with him? He says, "I'm fine." Maybe he's right. I don't see any blood, but how could I be fine? Horns blare. I think that's my friend's teenage son on the other side of the street. "Is that Joanne?" I hear him ask, panicked. He gets back into his mother's car and they drive off. Maybe this is a dream. Well, this wasn't a dream. In fact, I had 4 pelvic fractures and the whole right side of my body, all the soft tissue was crushed. Someone who worked with me at the center ran over to me, and at the same time that a police officer ran over with my purse, and she said, "We have to call Fred. Fred is my husband." I knew in that moment that the phone call he was about to receive was his absolute greatest nightmare. Fred's parents were killed in 1962 by a drunk driver in a head-on collision, and he was raised by his grandparents. And we had talked over the years about really teaching our children to never be in a car with anybody who'd been drinking, to never drink and drive. And we had gotten our kids through their teenage years. And at this point, they were both out of college and working and doing well in life. And yet Fred had to get this phone call. And an ambulance took me to the hospital. And as soon as I saw him standing out in front of the emergency room, I said, "I am sorry." And that's kind of all I could really say at that moment. I was still in shock. I was also at that point on a little morphine, which they'd given me when I was lying on the street. And I'm going to read you the beginning of chapter 2, which kind of gives you a glimpse of what the rest of the book is about. Being hit by a car is not my first blow, although it's probably the most literal, and it won't be my last, but it will be a catalyst for me. A sudden graphic stop to my constantly in motion existence, my need to produce and achieve to feel worthy of love, my need to control everything because I've believed that it would make me safer. It will be the test that finally teaches me that my needs are masks and that control is an illusion. I've had plenty of opportunities, losses, hard ones, to learn to let go, but I grieved my losses and went right back to my old ways. The accident has stripped me, made me totally dependent on others, put cracks in my bones and revealed cracks in my armor. I can't go back to my old ways, not easily anyway. Over time and through a series of other physical and emotional challenges, I will discover that losing control can be the best way to truly gain it. Letting go means letting in light, revealing my real power, and finally feeling that deep sense of peace that I'd been desperate to find. So why was this so different? I'd had surgeries, I'd had losses. This was different because I couldn't do anything for myself. And for those of you who've been felled with something serious where you can't feed yourself, where you can't get yourself to the bathroom, it's entirely different. And not only did I need to learn to ask for help, but I needed not to judge the help that was given. And that's not easy, right? Was he showing up fast enough when I rang the little bell? Was he making the sandwich the way I'd want? Was he remembering when I would need meds? All of that. And he was my husband who completely rose to the occasion, but had not been a caretaker ever before. So there was a lot of learning to be done. Here's a scene from the hospital where my rabbis come to visit me. And I share this with you because it was magical, and perhaps you'll see why. It's morning again. I'm not sure how many mornings there have been. Time is altered in the hospital until they tell me it's been 5 days since the accident. I try to eat the oatmeal. It's awful. Dried out. Sugar doesn't help. Nothing is sweet now. Fred is reading me emails. Can't concentrate. People want to visit. Please don't. I think about times I've visited people in the hospital, bearing gifts and likely way too much energy. Keep the flowers and balloons. They don't help. I look up to see people entering the room slowly, quietly, as if they're floating on air. My rabbis are here. Stacy, Richard, and Clara. Let me just interrupt and say some of the names have been changed. People who wanted their names changed. So there really is no Richard or Clara, but you can use your imagination if you know the rabbis in Marin. My rabbis are here, Stacy, Richard, and Clara, and Dan, our temple's visiting musician from North Carolina. What are they doing here? Richard's wearing slacks and Stacy's in a dress. Must be Saturday, Shabbat. Richard's carrying a Torah. Don't rabbis bring a Torah to people who are dying? I'm not dying. Maybe they think I'm dying. They know how to visit someone in a hospital with soft, soothing voices, slow movement. They greet me and I see neither horror nor pity on their faces. I notice that I was bracing myself and begin to relax. Their mere presence is a balm to my nervous system. They smell good. A rich, layered scent of Middle Eastern spices, of mystery and memory. The memory of sitting next to my father in temple on High Holy Day, twirling his heat, the fringes of his prayer shawl. I'm leaning into him, sharing the timelessness, the ancient melodies, the choreography of standing, swaying, and sitting back down. Then Stacy begins to sing, and I feel my soul rise out of my body. I remember a similar feeling during the accident, like a cosmic leaf had scooped me off the hood of the car and gently placed me on the ground. How is it that her singing is more powerful than the painkillers? I can see the pain, but it can't touch me. Now, Dan's voice joining hers in the Misha Berach, the prayer for healing. May the source of strength, who blessed the ones before us, help us find the courage. It's like velvet caressing my arms. As they sing, I am aware of holiness, or what I think must be holiness. The air feels different, and time has either stopped or expanded. I can't tell. I feel fully released, yet safe at the same time. But then my jaw clenches. I need them to leave. It's too much tenderness, kindness I cannot reciprocate. In many of the readings that I've done and book clubs that I've attended, people have commented on the idea of what is it that we bring when we visit people in the hospital. And we do it because we're commanded to do it, right? We visit the sick, console the bereaved. These are part of Elu Devarim, the obligations without measure. And I do it too, but what I'm sharing in this book is consider how broken the person is. Consider how serious the surgery was, and maybe wait a few days, unless you are in that person's absolutely immediate circle. Obviously, food is always welcomed once the person is home. But this was a new awareness for me and something that I hadn't considered until I was in this position. Keep visits short. When someone is severely injured or very ill or has had a serious surgery, short visits are the best. And people need to rest. These are just things to keep in mind, and something that I hope I can share and that can enlighten those of you who always want to do what's right. One of the many things I learned also during this whole experience was that I needed to restructure my life so that I could show up for other people the way so many people showed up for me. And I've been able to do that, and I'm very grateful for that. I'm gonna read another little passage. I don't know what to do with myself lying here in bed hour after hour. The silence is torturous. If I can't do things, my mind starts to spin out. Keeping busy has always been my default to avoid an emotional downward spiral. Now, with nothing to do, I keep replaying the accident, the crash that sounds like explosion, the terror of being on top of a moving vehicle, lying on the street in shock. This isn't new. Quiet has always been my enemy. I was at a Buddhist meditation session in Chicago during college, squirming, aware of every passing second, suppressing the urge to run out the door. Eastern religion sounded good, but the silence was unbearable. I'm a doer, always busy. I fill time by getting things done. But now I couldn't get things done if I wanted to. Don't have the strength, can't concentrate. If I could, I would send thank you notes like I did after Mom died, and after Raina died, and after Bob died. Those back-to-back losses, especially Mom's and Raina's, only 5 months apart, felt like Groundhog Day. Write the eulogy, place the obituary, deal with the mortuary, schedule the funeral, repeat. There were so many tasks that had to get done, and it didn't matter what kind of shape I was in. I just handled it. The grief could wait. It was always right there, bottled up just long enough to give everyone else space to have their reactions. The grief would explode in moments when I least expected it, driving in the car or trying to go back to work too soon. A wave would reduce me to a quaking, crumbling, wailing shell of a human, at the mercy of sobs coming from a place so deep, I thought they might never end, and I'd close my office door for a chance to catch my breath. Months had passed, yet the grief was still debilitating, and I was embarrassed because it showed. Felt weak. Food and sleep felt like the needs of a former self, the self who knew her place in the world. Cumulative loss can turn you into a shell of yourself. But I kept moving. Choose life, Jewish tradition tells us. And I figured that the best way to cope was to fulfill my responsibilities to the family and at work to the best of my ability. If I collapsed at the end of the day, leaving Fred to pick up the pieces, so be it. Day after day, I stood up, showed up, stepped up, and to the world, I was nothing short of remarkable, just how I liked it. You know, many of you are not on screen, but for those of you who are, does any of this sound familiar? This need to really show up and say, I'm good. I'm good. I know, Julia, you've been through so much, right? And all of us, Bonnie, you have, I mean, there are familiar faces here throughout. It's this thing in us, deep in us. And I have to say, even as I was literally airborne, thrown, and here's the thing, had the car that hit me been an SUV, I would not be alive today. I would have gone under. Because the car that hit me was a sedan, the angle where it hit me caused my body to go over and onto the hood of the car. Even as it was happening, and I was screaming to God and to the universe silently, but in my head, really? Really? This now, after these 3 back-to-back losses that I've endured, it was just a few years earlier. And then almost immediately, something like a switch flipped, and I went, okay, let's do this. And I credit that with the strength of my ancestors that is in my DNA. And I'm looking around at you, and I'm guessing that some pretty significant percentage of you are Ashkenazic Jews as well. And we are the descendants of people who left where they were in Europe, either because they were being persecuted or because there was no economic opportunity. And they went to a country where they didn't know anyone, where they didn't speak the language and put one foot in front of the other and said, I can do this. And somehow that strength became very apparent to me in that moment. And in the subsequent weeks and months, I developed a mantra that was, I can do this. And I said it again and again and again. And I did not fully believe it for a very long time because I didn't know if I could do this. I didn't know. They said your recovery is going to take up to 1.5 years. Prior to that, every recovery I've ever gone through had taken 2 weeks. I didn't understand how I could even wrap my brain around 1.5 years. But I developed some tools. One of them was this can do, I can do it, I can do it, I'm going to do this. Damn it, I'm going to do this. Attitude. Another one was gratitude. Counting your blessings is really a surefire way to tip the scales on feeling sorry for yourself. Excuse me. I've been with toddlers, so I think something is happening with my voice today. I definitely felt sorry for myself as all this was happening, but I would then say, but you have this husband who loves you and children who love you, and you are part of an incredibly loving and giving community who are showing up with meals and to walk the dog, because my husband couldn't leave me alone at all. Someone had to walk the dog. Someone had to do pretty much everything. And I would remind myself how incredibly fortunate I was that I had sick leave that I could use up. And when that ran out, I could have disability. And it wasn't as much as my regular paycheck, but we weren't going to lose our house. We were going to be okay. And so that gratitude is something that I learned as a tool for coping with challenging times. And we're all going to face them. We all face losses. We all face illnesses, if not in ourselves, in our loved ones. And we need the tools to combat that. Another tool was something my mom always said to me, and nod if you're on screen and your mom said this to you. This too shall pass. I recently learned that this is from the Talmud. It's Gam Ze Ya'avor. And I wrote it and I had it as a sign right above my bed. This too shall pass. This pain you're feeling, these flashbacks of the accident and the trauma response that you're feeling, it's going to pass. Tomorrow might not be better than today, but it's going to be different. And the day after that might be better. And telling myself this over and over again was super helpful. People ask me if my religion was helpful, if faith was helpful. Yeah, and I'm going to read you an excerpt of the book. A package containing my friend George's slightly worn copy of Psalms for a New Day by Debbie Perlman arrives in the mail. Psalms? Not my thing. Still, I'll open it and read. Sit beside me, O Eternal, comfort my soul. Call to me my cherished memories to bring me forward through adversity, to stretch from then to now to beyond, beckoning to a future you will guard. Walk beside me, O Eternal, comfort my soul. Help me find the broken pieces, gathering them to my trembling hand, raw materials for my future life. Let me find your hand in this design. Wrap me in your healing light. Wrap me in your healing care. I am surprised. Now, this is still the book. I am surprised by how reading these words makes me feel. That my ancestors understood how cherished memories might carry me through. That they both knew and articulated that in this brokenness live the seeds, the raw material for my future life. For so much of my life, I stared at the pages of prayer books, hoping to be stirred by words, the poetry, but mostly I was moved. More often, it's been the melodies of our prayers that rouse my soul. Or perhaps it's something holy that happens when people gather and leave their skepticism in the parking lot. Many times while in synagogue, I've glanced up hopefully almost beseechingly at the Ner Tamid, the eternal light that burns inside every Jewish temple, reminding us of an eternal presence, a oneness, call it God or some unnamed force. Sometimes nothing happens. Other times there's a connection, and I slip into a safe zone, a place of ease, a musical chord that resonates. This is hardly the first time I've been caught off guard by the wisdom of sages. It hasn't always been from the heritage of my birth. And I go on to talk about how in college I sampled all these other faiths. I was on this spiritual journey. The Judaism with which I grew up didn't feel spiritual to me, and it took a long journey of checking out many other things before I came back and found my place in the Jewish community. The book takes me not only through the full recovery from my accident. I am pleased to say that I made an absolutely complete recovery. I climb mountains, I do yoga. It is really nothing short of a miracle. And then other things happen because that's how life is. I had a surprise diagnosis of colon cancer, and from that, I'm also fine now. I always jump to the spoiler alert, but I'm fine. I'm really fine, but it was a terrifying scare. And I went through a major surgery. And after that, I was lucky enough to be rated at a stage 1, and I was good to go. I kept learning that all the new tools I had developed during the accident were going to serve me throughout my life. We were caught in a category for direct hit of a hurricane in Mexico. I mean, everything was destroyed. Bandits were roaming the streets. Food and water were running out. The airport was damaged so badly that there were no flights in or out. It was terrifying. And eventually on day 4, we were airlifted out of Mexico by the Mexican military, safety to Tijuana, where we then crossed the border on foot and took a bus to San Diego. It was crazy. Thing after thing, this is Lisette. Lisette, can you go back outside now with your dad? Oh, please. So I'm going to pick up again at another point. Connecting the dots between painful moments from my past is sparking new insights. Being in constant motion has always been a distraction, a way of not letting my guard down, of appearing to be on top of everything, of not confronting my sadness and disappointment. Now that my bones have healed, my tendency is to pick up the pace once again and go right back into overdrive. Yet my stamina hasn't fully returned. I begin to view my diminished energy as a gift that I should take advantage of. It forces me to slow down, which is something I ordinarily fight. I start to pay attention to what's happening around me, to how I feel at any given moment, and to what my options are, rather than thinking that my only choice is to barrel through. So it was a continuous learning of these lessons. And I want to stop for a moment now and see if there are any questions. I have a few more segments that I can read, but if you're like me, you might not be able to remember your question 20 minutes later or 15 minutes later. So I'm going to stop and see. And either raise your hand like this. Howard, how do you want to do this? Or do you want
people can either use the raise hand function in the reactions button at the bottom, and I can call on you, or else you can put your question in the chat as well.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. So if you raise your hand, I will unmute you. And
I'm going to open the chat as well.
So
wow,
maybe
somebody's here from Toronto. That's awesome. And thank you, Lynn. I guess everyone can read it. It says you bring a smile and warmth and compassion. It's what it's all about, right? It's why we're in community. We receive, we give some more, we give some more. It makes a really big difference. I'm going to read another little excerpt until I see some questions. Great. Okay. All right. This is after it wasn't the cancer diagnosis yet. It was, we think it's cancer. We think it's probably cancer. So what do you do with something like that? Why are you even telling me this, right? Why can't you just wait until the biopsy comes back? So it says, next, I do what I do in a crisis: ask the right questions, get the answers I need to take the next steps, tell the people who I think will make me feel better, and then have a conversation with myself. We're not 100% sure that it's cancer. Could be cancer, he'd said. Or did he say it's probably cancer? Am I getting ahead of myself, or am I just being realistic? Trying not to bury my head in the sand because it's cozy down there? Maybe he was trying to ease me in. Maybe he's already certain that it's cancer. This self-talk isn't helpful. I want to be alone. It's a new feeling. Untrusting of what others might say. Want to protect myself. Limit the input. Quiet the voices until I know for certain if it's cancer. If I'm now a cancer patient, a person with cancer, but still a person, still the same person. If it's cancer, I tell myself that I won't let it define me. I can do this, but can I? Where the hell am I going to find the strength? I know that God only gives you what you can handle, or so someone said, but really? Is this a test? I want to make a deal. If the biopsy can just come back negative, I'll be a nicer person. I won't smoke any weed. I'll make bigger donations. I'll go to services more often. I'll stop eating cookies, exercise more regularly. What can I do to make this go away? And why the hell should I be spared? Why should I make it out of my 60s when neither Raina nor Bob did? Those are my siblings. Stop it. Cancer isn't always a life sentence. And even if it's cancer, as the doctor thinks, it doesn't mean a one-way ticket to the cemetery. There's treatment, surgery, chemo, options. Is this what they call bargaining? Draw on your strength, I tell myself, now barricaded by pillows on my bed, the door shut. I hope he doesn't knock. I need to do this alone, at least this part. What have I learned in the last couple of years? One step at a time. Can't comprehend the big picture. There are too many variables, unknowns. What are we dealing with right now? This very minute, I might have colon cancer. I can wait for the results. I have no choice. Breathe, cry a little, and breathe some more. I wonder if I still have any Ativan medicine cabinet. And then I'm going to switch over to the very end of the book and read you two little excerpts. One, there's the end of the book, and then there's an epilogue. This is the end of the book before the epilogue. I've learned so many things over these past 10 years, from what it means to grow in a relationship to how to support a loved one through troubling times. I'm still learning to think before I speak, but I'm pausing more and more to let the moments unfold. I've come to know that there are some things we can control, but that most things we can't. Pain is inevitable. Given my osteoporosis, I will probably go on to break bones, become ill in one way or another, require treatment, grieve losses, lose sleep in fear. It's inevitable. But through everything, I've learned to exercise patience in a whole way, to not give in to despair, to trust that love and goodness will accompany even the worst conditions, and to hold on to life like a life raft, and to hold on to love like a life raft. I can and should take good care of my precious body so it will continue to serve me well beyond my 60s. But I know that even if I eat well and exercise, if I give back, show empathy, make people laugh, work hard and go easy on myself, bad things may happen. I honor the memory of my parents and my siblings by loving their children and grandchildren, by hosting family events, attending every gathering with enthusiasm, and honoring the unique qualities of every child. I share my knowledge, whatever wisdom I've acquired of life, of language, of writing, and of Judaism with the young ones in our family. I am open about what it takes to nurture a healthy relationship, how important it is to communicate honestly while being sensitive to your partner and picking your battles carefully. Anything I can do to lighten their load or give them a few save them a few painful steps, I'll do. My birth, I've come to finally understand, may have been an accident, but it was no mistake. For years, I felt that I didn't fit in my family or the place in which I was raised. I wondered how my siblings' lives might have evolved if I hadn't arrived unexpectedly when my parents were in their 40s. But now I know without a doubt that I have an important role to play in my family and in my community. I will continue to show up and be present for myself and everyone I love, because that's what it means to move through the accidents to fulfill my purpose. Would you like to hear the epilogue? But this is now a few years later, and it's just a very short little addendum. July 2021. For the very first time, I hear the phrase, "I love you, Yo-Yo," unsolicited from my granddaughter, Zoe. And there's an explosion of warmth in my chest, a percolating ecstasy, an unmistakable tickle at the back of my nose. Tears blur my vision. If I had a mic, I would drop it. If I were on stage, I'd call scene. This perfect blend of kindness and curiosity, spirit and humor, this flawless human specimen with cobalt blue eyes and wispy blonde curls says that she loves me. I didn't know it could get better than her hugging my leg, clutching onto me in a moment of fear, putting her head on my shoulder as I sing her a lullaby, and then it did. Miracle moments in life offset the pain, panic, and grief we experience. Becoming a parent held that miraculous wonder. It was as if ours was the first child, the only child, the best child, the chosen one. And becoming a grandparent delivered an unprecedented level of awe, a love unknown, a feeling of, how can this possibly be? Our baby has had a baby. How do we deserve this? This feeling could melt a hardcore cynic, turn a terrorist into a peace activist. At the sight of her first real smile, assuredly not caused by gas, at her earliest chuckles, at her very first steps, biting sarcasm fell out of our lives. Bitterness became obsolete. Our children are finally here in our home once again, visiting from LA, where they both now live after a year and a half of strict lockdown protocols. In December 2020, COVID-19 infected first the baby, then Max, and finally Blair, pregnant with their second child. They recovered and welcomed a healthy son who is every bit as miraculous as his big sister. Yo-Yo, Zoe calls from the pack and play that is her temporary crib in our closet. Hang on, honey, I respond, quickly strapping on the walking boot I've been in for 7 weeks so far. It's true, I broke my foot during our last trip to LA, missing a step and tumbling to the ground, but compared to everything else I've endured, this is merely an annoyance. Where's Grandpa? I want to play golf. And so the day begins. A day in which I will push myself to the limit, but not beyond, because I want to experience every ounce of enjoyment by preparing food, launching art projects, playing catch, reading stories, making bottles, drinking wine with the 30-somethings. The opportunities to practice what I've learned are endless, because one thing is guaranteed. The hits will just keep on coming in one form or another. When I broke my foot, I reminded myself that it could have been worse. I might have broken my hip when I fell. But again, I lucked out. This will heal. Accidents happen, and they're often beyond our control. But we do have a hand in how we respond. The inside door of my medicine cabinet still displays the list of lessons I learned from the accident. My closet still holds the poster wishing me well from the Brandeis School students. I will never get rid of my Wonder Woman bathrobe, the furry elephant hat from Danny, or the pink semicolon nightshirt from Fred. Do you get that joke? Just want to make sure everybody gets that joke. But I had a semicolon after the surgery. As they will forever remind me of how much caring and humor help. During the seemingly endless months of COVID lockdown, on days when we were trapped at home because the smoke-filled air from Northern California wildfires was unbearable, I told myself that at least I loved my home, my husband, my life. I left my job at the JCC and haven't looked back. My days unfold naturally now with yoga and hikes, writing, producing a podcast, reading, and giving what I can to those who've touched my heart. I try to reach out to people in my life who are struggling, to lend support where I can, to show up. In my mid-60s, I'm countering every ache, each confounding piece of technology, every instance of misplacing my glasses or AirPods, with a reminder that I'm lucky to be aging. My siblings didn't have that chance. It's hard to believe that I'm now 7 years older than Raina was when she died. She would be proud of who and how I am today, and that makes me smile. After so many years in and out of emotional turmoil, I've come to like myself and enjoy spending time alone. I make conscious choices to work, but not too much, to write, but not beat myself up when I don't, to provide ongoing support to those I love, aware that too much can feel smothering, to cook whole foods, to exercise and meditate, to spend some time alone, but most of my time in the company of others, because that is what nurtures and sustains me. I am an extrovert, case closed. My deeply treasured Jewish wisdom informs my days, and I regularly go back to the obligations without measure, Elu Devarim, which remind me to honor my parents, be compassionate, always learn, be welcoming, visit the sick, celebrate weddings, be present for mourners, pray with sincerity, help people in conflict, and remember that the study of Torah, of truth in whatever form, leads to all of this. My tolerance for meanness and rancor is shrinking, and my appreciation for kindness and expressions of love continues to grow. I vow to stop at every lemonade stand, to, like my father, to pet every dog I'm allowed to pet. My life is enriched when I notice the beauty and the fragrance of flowers, and moved by the artistry of musicians and dancers, and can marvel at great writing, incredible painting, and even exceptional performances on the basketball court. Go Warriors. Our lives are hard and messy, unpredictable and glorious, and it's our job to learn about ourselves, to learn what makes us unique and recharges our batteries so we can make meaning of our days, spread joy wherever we can, and contribute in some positive way to this colossal project known as life. Zoe asks Alexa, the digital assistant she assumes is on duty, to play the song Let It Go from Frozen, a film she has yet to see. I delight in watching her sweep across our backyard, flailing her arms, twirling her tiny body, oblivious to how she's being perceived, to the impact she's having on others. My heart overflows with deep pleasure as I witness her joy, her freedom, her purity, her creative expression, her natural ability to let it go. All is right. Maybe there are no accidents. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joanne. So if anybody does have a question, they can either put it in the chat or use the digital, reactions section to raise your hand. I can call on you to unmute you. I will ask one question, which is how you decided what the process was when you realized that you wanted to write a book about your experience.
I've always been a writer, but I've always written what people need me to write. So I was a journalist, mostly. It's the exact opposite of writing a memoir. Keep your opinion out of it. Describe what happened. This happened, this happened, this happened. That is not a memoir. A memoir is bringing people into scenes, having themes that lead to universal truths where readers can find themselves somewhere in your story, where people can pick up little gems. And there was a point where I was recovering. It was even after that. I started, writing little short, like, chapters. I also had this crazy life in rock and roll radio in San Francisco in the 70s. And so I have stories upon stories you can probably imagine. And whatever it is that you're imagining is true. That happened and other things like it. And I wanted to capture some of some of the essence of my siblings for future generations and my parents as well. There's a lot in the book, of course, that I didn't read to you that really captures a lot about them so that their children and grandchildren and then subsequent generations, that it would exist somewhere in print. And I had to take a lot of classes to learn how to write a memoir and writing groups and work with editors. And it was a craft that, I thought I was a writer, but not that kind of a writer. So very humbling. And COVID helped in that I had a lot of hours to fill. So I worked on it. And initially it was just going to be for friends and family. And as I kept working on it, making it better, I thought, well, maybe it's going to be good enough to be a book for everybody. And that's what happened. And I worked with She Writes Press, which is a feminist press in Berkeley. They are considered a hybrid publisher, which means I paid them rather than them paying me, but it has full distribution as though it's with Random House. It has complete distribution, and I get a slightly higher percentage of the sales price. It's also an audiobook, which I read, and I don't sound like this. Excuse me. It's a 5.5-hour audiobook. It's on Audible, and it's an ebook, also available on Kindle.
Great. So Deb, if you can unmute yourself and ask a question.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. I really enjoyed your presentation. My very dear friend Yetta gave me your book, and we've been talking about it. So I appreciate your personal sharing with us. And my question is this. How do you keep that insight into, letting go beyond the traumatic experience? Although I didn't have an accident, I did have a very scary diagnosis that required surgery and radiation. And while I was in the middle of it, there was, I'm going to do this differently and that differently and that. And then now that life is slowly getting back to the normal, I'm worried that I'm going to go back to those old habits and not carry those insights forward.
It's in your control. That's the first thing I will tell you. We give ourselves messages all the time. We talk to ourselves constantly. The problem is mostly what we're saying is, who do you think you are? You're not good enough. All these negative messages. And we can control that and catch ourselves doing it and shift to a different message. So it's a practice like anything else. I could never meditate. As I read you a little segment when I was in college, I couldn't sit still long enough. And all through the decades, I couldn't meditate. Well, go figure. Now I can. Why? Because I practiced. I practiced and practiced, and I found that it serves me. It quiets my mind. It helps me not to be reactive. But it required practice and positive self-talk. I'm sure there's a better way to refer to it, but you know what I mean. Giving yourself positive, encouraging messages is a practice. Write the things down that you want to do and put them somewhere so that you won't forget, because you have to see them all the time. There's actually a point in the book where I share these things I wanted to remember that I learned after the accident. They are still on the inside of my medicine cabinet. Every time I open that up to get a cream or anything, boom, I am faced with those lessons. And I'm not saying I read them every single time, but I read them sometimes. And they are reminders. Here's a good one. I'm guessing, and your name's Deb?
Yeah, Deb.
Deb, I'm guessing that not everyone in your life showed up for you during all those months of treatment, or showed up for you in the way you would have liked.
Yes.
Because that's true, because everyone shows their love differently and people show up differently. And I had to learn that. I had to learn that I had to accept people had different capacities for showing up, different needs for intimacy. I have a lot of need for intimacy. And it was really a way of accepting that people in my life are not just like me, and they're not going to do it the way I do it. And that's okay, because there are other people who will.
And the one thing I have been very fortunate about is that all through the process and even beyond that, I have a lot of gratitude, a lot of gratitude.
Doesn't it
And
make a difference?
Oh, and I think I had gratitude before the diagnosis and surgery and radiation, but oh my gosh, I am so in touch with my gratitude on a daily basis. And that to me is something that I'm carrying forward from that scary experience.
Amen. That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you. So Zelda asks in the chat, Joanne, you mentioned quiet the voices. Do you have any suggestion about how to quiet the voices?
Well, you only want to quiet certain voices. Are we talking about voices that say, what if this? What if this? This is going to happen. And then this, I call that monkey mind. I mean, it's basically anxiety. And I got to say, once again, I'm going to go back to the Ashkenazi Jewish thing. This is deep in our DNA, right? Anxiety comes with the territory. This is who we are as a people, and we have to accept that in ourselves. But what you can do is change the voices. You can counter the voices that don't serve you. So I ask myself, is this thought pattern serving me? If the answer is no, it's in my control to stop it. That's not easy. It's not easy at all, but you can do it. And it's really, I now ask myself this about all kinds of things. Are friendships serving me? Are there certain relationships in my life that I felt compelled to continue? Maybe they're not serving me. Maybe that person doesn't make me better or call upon my best self. Maybe I can reframe that relationship. So I think it's a lot of realizing what we can control.
Thanks. So Lynn Feingold asks, did you have any feelings of guilt before letting go?
Oh my God, yes. All kinds of feelings. That too comes with the territory, I think, right? I wanted to be all things to all people, and I never had any evidence that I couldn't be, right? So I just kept trying to be, but it comes at a price. And we all know that, right? We know that deep inside. If when I was at the JCC, I just kept adding programs and making it bigger and bigger and bigger until it was completely overwhelming and I couldn't get it all done. And I was working 12 hours a day, and I just, like, with stress level that so wasn't necessary, but I had created the problem. I had tried to do too much, thinking that I can do too much and be all things to all people. So yeah, is there guilt? Sure, but I have to temper that, because guilt is, I think, a pretty useless emotion, don't you? It doesn't serve us. Again, what serves you?
Okay, well, thank you.
And you're welcome to everybody who's saying thank you.
This was really wonderful. I want to thank you, Joanne. So, so everybody had in the email with the links that included a link how to purchase the different versions of the book. It's really a wonderful book, and I appreciate your writing it and sharing it with us.
Thank you so much. Thanks for this opportunity, Howard, and thanks for all the work that you do.
Great. Okay. Well, be well, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Thanks to
And
Marcy
Am Yisrael
Ballinger.
Chai. Can I end by saying Am Yisrael Chai?
Amen. Be well. Bye-bye.